Good morning, West Coast Nazarenes. Andrew here from the Portal Burning Church of the Nazarene, bringing to you day 16 of our 60-day journey through the Word. Today finds us finishing 2 Samuel and getting into Kings. So as usual, I'd just like to open the day with a word of prayer. I thank you, God, for the word that you have given us, and I just have been enjoying going through it, and I just pray that you continue to show us new things each day, and that encourage us to continue reading the word every day and to learn more about you each day and how you love us. In your name I pray, amen. Without further ado, let's get into the word. Second Samuel chapter 16. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, and 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king of Ziba asked, "Why have you brought these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and the fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness." The king then asked, "Where is your master's grandson?" Ziba said to him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the Israelites will restore me to my grandfather's kingdom." Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours. I humbly bow." Ziba said, "May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king." As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and special guards were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." But the king said, "What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? Is he cursing because the Lord said to him, 'Curse David'? Who can ask, 'Why did you do this?'" David said to Abishai and his officials, "My son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? Leave him alone, let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today." So David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. Meanwhile, Absalom and the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. Then Hushai the Archite, David's confidant, went to Absalom and said to him, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Absalom and said to Hushai, "So this is the love you show your friend? If he's your friend, why didn't you go with him?" Hushai and Absalom, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people, and all the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the Son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you. Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give us your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel answered, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now in those days, the advice of Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. 2 Samuel chapter 17. Ahithophel said to Absalom, I would choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I would attack him while he is weary and weak. I would strike him with terror, and then all the people will flee. I would strike down only the king and bring all the people back to you. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed. This plan seemed good to Absalom and to all the elders of Israel. But Absalom said, Summon also Hushai the Archite, so we can hear what he has to say as well. When Hushai came to him, Absalom said, Ahithophel has given this advice. Should we do what he says? If not, give your opinion. Hushai replied to Absalom, The advice of Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men. They are fighters and as fierce as a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Besides, your father is an experienced fighter. He will not spend the night with the troops. Even now he is hidden in a cave or some other place. If you should attack his troops first, whoever hears about it will say, There has been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even the bravest soldier, whose heart is like a heart of lion, will melt with fear, for all Israel knows that your father is a fighter, and those with him are brave. So I advise you, let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand and the seashore, be gathered to you, with yourself leading them into battle. Then we will attack him wherever he may be found, and we will fall on him as dew settles on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city and drag it down into the valley until not so much as a pebble is left. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than that of Ahithophel, for the Lord had determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I have advised him to do so and so. Now send a message at once and tell David, Do not spend the night at the fords in the wilderness. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at En-Rogel. A female servant was to go inform them, and they were to go and tell King David, for they could not risk being seen entering the city. But a young man saw them and told Absalom, so the two of them left at once and went to the household of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in his courtyard, and they climbed down into it. His wife took a covering and spread it over the opening of the well and scattered grain over it. No one knew anything about it. When Absalom's men came to the woman of the house, they asked, Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The woman answered them, They crossed over the brook. The men searched, but no one found them. So they returned to Jerusalem. After they had gone, the two climbed out of the well and went in to inform King David. They said to him, Set out across the river at once. Ahithophel has advised such and such against you. So David and all the people with him set out and crossed the Jordan by daybreak. No one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his house in order and then hanged himself, so he died and was buried in his father's tomb. David went to Mahanaim with Absalom, crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Amasa was the son of Jether, an Ishmaelite, who had married Abigail, the daughter of Nash, and sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. The Israelites and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. When David came to Mahanaim, Shaobi son of Nahash from Rabbah the Amorites, and Machir son of Amiel from Lo-debar, and Barzillai the Gadite from Rogelim brought bedding and bowls and articles of pottery. They also brought wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curds, sheep and cheese from cow's milk for David and his people to eat. For they said, "The people have become exhausted and hungry and thirsty in the wilderness." 2 Samuel chapter 18. David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent out his troops, and a third under the command of Joab, and a third under Joab's brother Abishai son of Zeruiah, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king told the troops, "I myself will surely march out with you." But the men said, "You must not go out. If we are forced to flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you are worth 10,000 of us. It would be better now for you to give us support from the city." The king answered, "I will do whatever seems best to you." So the king stood beside the gate while all his men marched out in units of hundreds and thousands. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, "Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." And all the troops heard the king giving orders concerning Absalom to each of his commanders. David's army marched out of the city to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There Israel's troops were routed by David's men, and the casualties that day were great, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest swallowed up more men that day than the sword. Now Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and his mule went under the thick branches of a large oak. Absalom's hair got caught in the tree. He was left hanging in midair while the mule was riding and kept going. When one of the men saw what happened, he told Joab, "I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree." Joab said to the man who told him this, "What? You saw him? Why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? Then I would have had to give you 10 shekels of silver and a warrior's belt." But the man replied, "Even 1,000 shekels were weighed into my hands, I would not lay a hand on the king's son. In our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai protect the young man Absalom for my sake. And if I had put my life in jeopardy, and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have kept your distance from me." Joab said, "I'm not going to wait like this for you." So he took 3 javelins in his hand and plunged them into Absalom's heart, while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree, and 10 of Joab's armor-bearers surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops stopped pursuing Israel, for Joab halted them. They took Absalom and threw him into a big pit in the forest and piled up a large heap of rocks over him. Meanwhile, all the Israelites fled to their homes. During his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it in the king's valley as a monument to himself, for he thought, "I have no son to carry in the memory of my name." He named the pillar after himself and called Absalom's monument to this day. Now Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, "Let me run and take the news to the king that the Lord has vindicated him by delivering him from the hands of his enemies." "You are not the one to take the news today," Joab told him. "You may take news another time, but you must not do so today, because the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to a Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed before Joab and ran off. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, again said to Joab, Come what may, please let me run behind the Cushite." But Joab replied, "My son, why do you want to go? You don't have any news that will bring you a reward. Come what may, I want to run." Joab said, "Run." Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the Cushite. While David was sitting between the inner and outer gates, the watchman went out from the roof of the gateway by the wall, and he looked out, and he saw a man running alone. The watchman called the king and reported it. The king said, "If he is alone, he must have good news." And the runner came closer and closer. Then the watchman saw another runner And he called down to the gateway, "Look, another runner." And the king said, "He must also be bringing good news." The watchman said, "It seems to me that the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok. He is a good man," the king said. "He comes with good news." Then Ahimaaz called out to the king. "All is well." He bowed down before the king. With his face to the ground, said, "Praise be to the Lord your God. He has delivered up those who lifted their hands against my lord the king. Is the young man Absalom safe?" Ahimaaz answered, "I saw great confusion just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me your servant, but I don't know what it was." The king said, "Stand aside and wait here." So he stood aside and waited there. Then the Cushite arrived and said, "My lord king, hear the good news. The Lord has vindicated you today by delivering you from the hand of all who rose up against you. May the enemies of the Lord the king and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man." Then the king was shaken. He went up from the roof in the gateway and wept. And he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." 2 Samuel chapter 19. Joab was told, "The king is weeping and mourning for Absalom and the whole army." The victory day was turned into mourning because on that day the troops heard it said, "The king is grieving for his son." The men stole into the city that night as men steal in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. The king covered his face and cried aloud, "Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, my son, my son!" Then Joab went into the house to the king and said, "Today you have humiliated all your men and have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This is worse for you than all the calamities that have come on you from your youth till now." So the king got up out of his seat in the gateway. When the men were told the king is sitting in the gateway, they all came before him. Meanwhile, the Israelites had fled to their homes. Throughout the tribes of Israel, all the people were arguing among themselves, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies. He is the one who rescued us from the hand of the Philistines, but now he has fled the country to escape from Absalom. And Absalom, who we anointed to rule over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?" King David sent a message to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, asked the elders of Judah, "Why should you be the last to bring the king back to his palace, since what is being said throughout Israel has reached the king in his quarters? You are my relatives, my own flesh and blood. So why should you be the last to bring back the king?" And say to Amasa, "Are you not my own flesh and blood? May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you are not the commander of my army for life in place of Joab." He won over the hearts of the men of Judah, so that they were of one mind. They sent word to the king, "Return you and all your men." Then the king returned and went as far as the Jordan. Now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out and meet the king and bring him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bethlehem, hurried down to the men of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 Benjamites, along with Ziba the steward of Saul's household, and his 15 sons and 20 servants. They rushed to the Jordan where the king was. They crossed over the ford to take the king's household over to do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell prostrate before the king and said to him, "May the Lord not hold me guilty. Do you not remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem? May the king put it out of his mind, for I, your servant, know that I have sinned. But today I have come here as first from the tribes of Joseph to come down and meet my lord the king." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed." David replied, "What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? What right do you have to interfere? Should anyone be put to death in Israel today, don't I know that today I am king over Israel?" So the king said to Shimei, You shall not die. And the king promised him on oath. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet nor trimmed his mustache, or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth?" He said, "My lord the king, since I am your servant and am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and I will ride on it so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me, and he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever you wish. All my grandfather's descendants deserve nothing but death from my lord the king, but you gave your servant a place among those who eat at your table. So what right do I have to make any more appeals to the king?" The king said to him, "Why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the land." Mizpah and the king said, "Let him take everything now that my lord the king has returned home safely." Barzillai the Gileadite came down from the Rogelim to cross the Jordan with the king and sent him on his way from there. Now Barzillai was very old, 80 years of age. He had provided for the king during his stay in Menahem, for he was a very wealthy man. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me and stay with me in Jerusalem, and I will provide for you." But Barzillai answered the king, "How many more years will I live that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? I am now 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between what is enjoyable and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still hear the voices of the male and female singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king? Your servant will cross over the Jordan with the king for a short distance, but why should the king reward me in this way? Let your servant return that I may die in my own town, in the tomb of my father and mother. But here is your servant Himham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever you wish." The king said, "Himham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him whatever you wish. Anything you desire from me, I will do for you." So all the people crossed the Jordan, and then the king crossed over. The king kissed Barzillai and bid him farewell, and Barzillai returned to his home. When the king went over to Gilgal, Caiman crossed with him, and all the troopers of Judah had the troops of Israel had taken the king over. Soon all the men of Israel were coming to the king and saying to him, "Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, steal the king away and bring him and his household across the Jordan together with all his men?" All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, "We did this because the king is closely related to us. Why are you angry about it? Have we eaten any of the king's portions? Have we taken anything for ourselves?" Then the men of Israel and men of Judah said, "We have 10 shares in the king, so we have a greater claim on David than you have. Why have you taken to treat us with contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing back our king?" For the men of Judah pressed their claims even more forcefully than had the men of Israel. 2 Samuel chapter 20. Now a troublemaker named Sheva, the son of Berki the Benjamite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and shouted, "We have no share in David, no part in Jesse's son. Every man to his tent, Israel." So all the men in Israel deserted David to follow Sheva, son of Bikri. But the men of Judah stayed behind their king all the way from the Jordan to Jerusalem. When David returned to his place in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of with the palace and put them in a house under guard. He provided for them but had no sexual relations with them. They were all kept in confinement until the day of their death, living as widows. Then the king said to Amasa, summon the men of Judah to come within 3 days and be here yourself. But when Amasa went to summon Judah, he took longer than the time the king had set for him. David said to Abishai, now Sheba son of Bichri will do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your master's men and pursue him, or all will find fortified cities and escape from us. So Joab's men, the Kerethites and the Perethites, and all the mighty warriors went out under the command of Abishai. They marched out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba son of Bichri. While they were at work in the great rock in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them, and Joab was wearing his military tunic, and strapped over his waist was a belt with a dagger in a sheath. As he stepped forward, it dropped out of its sheath. Joab said to Amasa, how are you, my brother? Then Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Amasa was not on his guard against the dagger in Joab's hand, and Joab plunged it into his belly, and his intestines spilled out on the ground. Without being stabbed again, Amasa died. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba son of Bichri. One of Joab's men stood beside Amasa and said, whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the middle of the road, and the man saw all the troops come to a halt there. When he realized that everyone who came to camp and Amasa stopped, he dragged him from the road into a field and threw a garment over him. After Amasa had been removed from the road, everyone went on with Joab to pursue Sheba son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel Beth-Maachah, and through the entire region of the Bichrites, who gathered together and followed him. All the troops with Joab came and besieged Sheba and Abel Beth-Maachah. They built a siege ramp up to the city and stood against the outer fortifications. While they were battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city, listen, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him. He went to her, and she asked, Are you Joab? I am, he answered. She said, listen to what your servant has to say. I am listening, he said. She continued, long ago they used to say, get your answer at Abel, and that settled it. We are peaceful and faithful in Israel. You are trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? Far be it from me, Joab replied, far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, torn from the hills country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king in support of David. The king against David. Hand over this one man, and I'll withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, his head will be thrown to you from the wall. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise advice, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it to Joab. He sounded the trumpet, and his men dispersed from the city, each returning home. And Joab went back to the king in Jerusalem. Joab was over Israel's entire army. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and Pelethites. Adoniram was in charge of forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Sheba was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and the Jerah was David's priest. Second Samuel chapter 21. During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years, so David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, it is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death. The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not a part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them, but Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, tried to annihilate them. David asked the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make atonement to you, so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" The Gibeonites answered him, "We have no right to demand silver or gold from Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death. What do you want me to do for you?" David asked. They answered the king, "As for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us, so that we have been decimated and have no place anywhere in Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be given to us and killed, and their bodies exposed before the Lord at Gibeah and Saul, the Lord's chosen one." So the king said, "I will give them to you." The king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. But the king took Aramonite and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Ariah's daughter Rizpah, whom she had borne to Saul, together with the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab, whom she had borne to Adriel, son of Barzillai the Meholathite. He handed them over to the Gibeonites, who killed them and exposed their bodies on a hill before the Lord. All 7 of them fell together. They were put to death during the first days of the harvest, just as the barley harvest was beginning. Rizpah, daughter of Ariah, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on a rock. From the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies, she did not let the birds touch them by day and the wild animals by night. When David was told of what Ariah's daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead. They had stolen their bodies from the public square at Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them after they struck Saul down at Gilboa. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and the bones of those who had been killed and exposed were gathered up. They buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the tomb of Saul's father Kish at Zillah and Benjamin, and did everything the king commanded. After that, God answered prayer on behalf of the land. Once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel. David went down with his men to fight against the Philistines, and he became exhausted. And Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of Rapha, whose bronze spearhead weighed 300 shekels, and who was armed with a new sword, said he would kill David. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came down to David's rescue. He struck the Philistine down and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, saying, "Never again will you go to battle with us, so that the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished." In the course of time, there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob. At that time, Sibekah the Hushathite killed Saph, one of the descendants of Rapha. He had another battle with the Philistines of Gob. At Gob, Elhan, son of Jair, the Belathite, killed the brother of Goliath the Gittite, who had a spear the shaft like a weaver's rod. In addition, in still another battle, which took place at Gath, there was a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He also was ascended from Rapha. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were descendants of Rapha and Gath, and they fell at the hands of David and his men. 2 Samuel 22. David sang to the Lord the words of the song when he delivered When the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul, he said, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation. He is my stronghold, my refuge and my Savior from violent people. You save me. I call to the Lord who is worthy of praise and have been saved from my enemies. The waves of death swirled about me, the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me, the cords of the grave corded around me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called on the Lord, I called out to the God, even his temple heard my voice. My cries came to his ears. The earth trembled and quaked, the foundations of the heavens shook, so they trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire from his mouth, burning coals blazed out. He parted the heavens and came down, dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew, and he soared on wings on the wind, and he made darkness his canopy around him. The dark rain clouds of the sky, out of the brightness of the pervasive bolts of lightning, blasted forth. The Lord thundered from heaven, the voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemy with great bolts of lightning. He routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed, and the foundations of the earth were laid bare at the rebuke of the Lord. At the blast of the breath from his nostrils, he reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster. But the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. The Lord has dealt with me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanliness of my hands. He has rewarded me, for I have kept the ways of the Lord. I am not guilty of turning from my God. All his laws before me, I have not turned away from his decrees. I have been blameless before him and have kept myself from sin. The Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanliness in his sight. To the faithful, show yourself faithful. To the blameless, show yourself blameless. To the pure, show yourself pure. But to the devious, you showed yourself shrewd. You saved the humble, but your eyes are haughty. But your eyes on the haughty to bring them low. You, Lord, are my lamp. You, Lord, the Lord turns my darkness into light. With your help, I can advance against a troop. With my God, I can scale a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all those who take refuge in him. For who is God besides the Lord, and who is the rock except our God? It is God who arms me with strength and keeps my way secure. He makes my feet like the feet of deer. He causes me to stand on the heights. He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend the bow of bronze. You make your saving help my shield. Your help has made me great. You provide a broad path for my feet so that my ankles do not give way. I pursued my enemies and crushed them. I did not turn back till they were destroyed. I crushed them completely, and they could not rise. They fell beneath my feet. You armed me with strength for battle. You humbled my adversaries before me. You made my enemies turn their backs in flight, and I destroyed my foes. They cried for help, but there was no one to save them. To the Lord, but he did not answer. I beat them as fine as the dust out of the earth. I pounded and trampled them like mud in the streets. You have delivered me from the attacks of the peoples. You have preserved me from the head of the nations. People I did not know now serve me. Foreigners cower before me. They all lose heart. They are come trembling from their strongholds. The Lord lives. Praise be to my rock. Exalted be my God, the rock, my Savior. He is the God who avenges me. He who puts the nations under me, who sets me free from my enemies. You exalted me above my foes, from violent men above my foes, and violent man, you rescued me. Therefore, I will praise you among the nations. I will sing praises to your name. He gives his king victories. He shows unfailing kindness to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. 2 Samuel chapter 23. These are the last words of David. The inspired utterance of David, son of Jesse, the utterance of the man exalted by the Most High, the man anointed by God of Jacob, the hero of Israel's song. The Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my tongue. The God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over people in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God, he is like the morning sunrise on a cloudless morning, in the brightness of the rain that brings grass from the earth. If my house were not right with God, surely he would not have made me an everlasting covenant, avenged and secured every part. He would not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire. But evil men are to be cast aside like thorns, which are not gathered with the hand. Whoever touches thorns uses a tool of iron or the shaft of a spear. They are burned up where they lie. These are the names of David's mighty warriors. Josheb-Bahashebeth, a Talchumite, was chief of the three. He raised a spear against 800 men whom he killed in one encounter. Next to him was Eleazar, son of Dodai, the Ahite. As one of the three mighty warriors, he was with David when they taunted the Philistines gathered at Pasdammim for battle. Then the Israelites retreated. But Eleazar stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day. The troops returned to Eleazar, but only to strip away the dead. Next to him was Shammah, son of Agi the Herite. When the Philistines banded together in a place where there was a field full of lentils, Israel's troops fled from them. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about great victory. During harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam when a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So the 3 mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well at the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it for me, Lord, to do this," he said. "It is not the blood of men who went to attack their risk their lives." And David would not drink from it. Such were the exploits of the 3 mighty warriors. Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of the 3. He raised his spear against 300 men whom he killed, and so he became as famous as the 3. Was he not held in greater honor than the 3? He became their commander, even though he was not included among them. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went into a pit in a snowy day and killed a lion. And he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went against him with a club. He snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. Such were the exploits of Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He too was famous as the 3 mighty warriors. He was held in greater honor than any of the 30. But he was not included among the 3, and David put him in charge of his bodyguard. Among the 30 were Asahel, the brother of Joab, and the son of Dodo, the Bethlehem, Shammah the Herite, Elkanah the Herite, Helis the Paltite, Ira, son of Ikish and Tukah, Abiezer of Anioth, Sibekai of the Hushathite, Zalman the Alathite, Mahira the Nethathite, Heled, son of Bana, the Nephatahite, Ithai son of Ribe from Gibeah and Benjamin, Benaiah the Pithorite from the ravens of Gash, Abiel the Abrathite, Azareth the Baalmite, Elibai the Shelbanite, the sons of Jashan, Jonathan of Shammah the Harite, Aram the Harite, Aphet the son of Ishbai the Malachathite, Elam son of Ahithophel the Gilonite, Hezer the Carmelite, Parai the Armonite, Eagle the son of Nathan, and Zobah the son of Zagri, Zelek the Ammonite, Nari the brethren, the armor bearer of Joab son of Zerah, Ira the Ithrite, Caleb the Ithrite, and Ira the Hittite. There were 37 in all. 2 Samuel chapter 24. Again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, Go and take a census of Israel and Judah. So the king said to Joab and the army commanders with him, Go throughout the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, and enroll the fighting men, so that I may know how many there are. But Joab replied to the king, May the Lord your God multiply the troops 100 times over, and may the eyes of my lord king see it. But why does my lord the king want to do such a thing? The king's word, however, was overruled by Joab and the army commanders, so they left the presence of the king to enroll the fighting men of Israel. After crossing the Jordan, they camped near Aroner, south of the town in the gorge, and then went through Gad and on to Jazer. They went to Gilead in the region of Tatham Hodishi and on to Dan, Jan, and around towards Sidon. Then they went toward the fortress of Tyre and all the towns of the Hivites and Canaanites. Finally, they went on to Beersheba and Negev of Judah. After they had gone through the entire land, they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 20 days. Joab reported the number of fighting men to the king. In Israel there was 800,000 able-bodied men who could handle a sword, and in Judah 500,000. David was conscience-stricken after he had counted the fighting men and said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly. What I have done now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done something very foolish. Before David got up the next morning, the word of the Lord had come to Gad, the prophet, and David's seer. Go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I am giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you. So Gad went to David and said to him, Shall there come on you 3 years of famine in your land, or 3 months of fleeing from your enemies while they pursue you, or 3 days of plague in your land? Now then, think on it, and think it over, and decide how I should answer the one who sent me. David said to Gad, I am in deep distress. Let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great. But do not let me fall into human hands. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel from that morning until the end of the time designated, and 70,000 of the people from Dan to Beersheba died. When the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, Enough, withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. When David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, I have sinned. I, the shepherd, have done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family. On that day Gad went to David and said to him, Go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah and the Jebusite. So David went up as the Lord had commanded through Gad. Then Araunah looked up and saw the king and his officials coming towards him. He went on and bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, Why has the king come to his servant but to buy your threshing floor? David answered, So I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped. Araunah said to David, Let the Lord king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here is threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your Majesty, Arna gives all this to the king. Arna also said to me, the Lord your God accept you. But the king replied to her, no, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord burnt offerings that cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered his prayer on behalf of the plague, and Israel was stopped. 1 Kings chapter 1. When King David was very old, he could not keep warm even when they put covers over him. So his attendant said to him, let us look for a young virgin to serve the king and take care of him. She can lie beside him so our lord the king may keep warm. Then they searched throughout Israel for a beautiful young woman and found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The woman was very beautiful, and she took care of the king and waited on him, but the king had no sexual relations with her. Now Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, put himself forward and said, I will be king. So he got chariots and horses ready with 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had never rebuked him by asking, why do you behave as you do? He was also very handsome and was born next after Absalom. Adonijah conferred with Joab, Azariah, and with Abiathar the priest, and they gave him their support. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah son of Jedah, and Nathan the prophet, and Shimei and Ray, and David's special guard did not join Adonijah. Adonijah then sacrificed sheep, cattle, and fattened calves at the stone of Zoheth near En-Rogel. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet or Benaiah or the special guard or his brother Solomon. Then Nathan asked Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, have you not heard that Adonijah the son of Haggith has become king, and our Lord David knows nothing about it? Now then, let me advise you on how you can save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Go to King David and say to him, my lord, the king, did you not swear to me your servant, surely Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? While you are still there talking to the king, I will come in and add my word to what you have said. So Bathsheba went to see the aged king in his room, where Abishag the Shunammite was attending him. Bathsheba bowed down, prostrating himself before the king. What is it you want? The king asked. She said to him, my lord, you yourself swore to me that your servant, by the Lord your God, Solomon your son, shall be king after me. He will sit on my throne. But now Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord, the king, do not know about it. He has sacrificed great numbers of cattle and fatted calves and the sheep, and has invited all the king's sons, Abiathar the priest, and Joab the commander of the army, but has not invited Solomon your servant. My lord the king, the eyes of the Israel are on you, to learn from you who you will sit on the throne of the Lord king after him. Otherwise, as soon as my lord king is laid to rest with his ancestors, I and my son Solomon will be treated like criminals. While she was speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived, and the king was told, Nathan the prophet is here. So he went before the king and bowed before the ground. Nathan said, have you, my lord the king, declared that Adonijah shall be king after you, and that he will sit on your throne? Today he has gone down and sacrificed great numbers of cattle and fattened calves and sheep. He has invited all the king's sons and commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. Right now they are eating and drinking with him and saying, long live King Adonijah. But your servant Zadok the priest and Benaiah son of Jedah and your servant Solomon he did not invite. Is this something my lord the king has done without letting his servants know who should sit on the throne of my king after him? Then King David said, call in Bathsheba. So she came into the king's presence and stood before him. The king then took an oath, as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, I will carry out this very day what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place. Then Bathsheba bowed down with her face to the ground, prostrating herself before the king, and said, May my lord King David live forever. King David said, Call in Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet and Benaiah son of Jonah. When they came before the king, he said to them, Take your lord's servants with you and have Solomon my son mount my own mule and take him down to Gihon. There have Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him king over Israel. Blow the trumpet and shout, Long live King Solomon. Then you are to go up with him, and he is to come sit on my throne and reign in my place. I have appointed him ruler over Israel and Judah. Benaiah son of Jehoiada answered the king, Amen. May the Lord, the God of the king, so declare it. As the Lord was with my king, so may he be with Solomon to make his throne even greater than the throne of my lord King David. So Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, the Kerethites, and the Pelethites went down and had Solomon on King David's mule, and they escorted him to Gihon. Zadok the priest took a horn of oil from the sacred tent and anointed Solomon. Then they sounded the trumpet, and all the people shouted, Long live King Solomon. And all the people went up after him, playing pipes and rejoicing greatly, so the ground shook with the sound. Adonijah and the guests who were with him heard it as they were finishing their feast. On hearing the sound of the trumpet, Joab asked, What is meaning all the noise in the city? Even as he was speaking, Jonathan, son of Abiathar, the priest, arrived. Adonijah said, Come in, a worthy man like you must bring good news. Not at all, Jonathan answered. Our Lord King David has made Solomon king. The king has sent with him Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and the Kerethites and Perethites, and they have put him on the king's mule. And Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king at Gihon. From there they have gone up cheering, and the city resounds with it. That's the noise you hear. Moreover, Solomon has taken the seat on the royal throne. Also, the royal officials have come to congratulate our Lord King David, saying, May your God make Solomon's name more famous than yours, and his throne greater than yours. And the king bowed and worshipped on his bed and said, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has allowed my eyes to see a successor on my throne today. At all this, all Adonijah's guests rose in alarm and dispersed, but Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, went back and took the horns of the altar. Then Solomon was told, Adonijah is afraid of the King Solomon and is clinging to the horns of the altar. He says, Let King Solomon swear to me that he will not put his servant to death with the sword. Solomon replied, If he shows himself to be worthy, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, but if evil is found in him, he will die. The king Solomon sent men, and they brought him down from the altar, and Adonijah bowed down, and King Solomon said, Go to your home. 1 Kings chapter 2. When the time drew near for David to die, he gave charge to Solomon his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong and act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go. And that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Now you yourself know what Joab son of Zeruiah did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Abner son of Ner and Amasa son of Jethro. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gilead, and let them be among you who eat at your table. They stood by me, and when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember, you have with you Shimei son of Gera the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. When he came down to meet me to the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. But now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father, and David and his rule was firmly established. Now Adonijah, son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" He answered, "Yes, peacefully." Then he added, "I have something to say to you. You may say it." "As you know," he said, "the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things changed as the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." "You may make it." So he continued, "Please ask King Solomon if he will not refuse me to give me Abishag the Shemronite as my wife." "Very well, I will speak to the king for you." When Bathsheba went to Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her. He bowed down before her and sat her on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and he sat down in his right hand. "I have one small request to make of you. Do not refuse me." The king replied, "Make it, my mother. I will not refuse you." She said, "Let Abishag the Shemronite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you request Abishag the Shemronite for Adonijah? You might well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Yes, for him and for Abiathar, the priest of Joab, son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God deal with me ever so severely if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who established me securely on the throne of my father David has found a dynasty for me. As he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death this day." So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah, and he died. To Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go back to your fields in Abiathar. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships." So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the houses of Eli. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah was Absalom to fled to the tent of the Lord and take hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then King Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, "Go strike him down." So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.'" He said, "No, I will die here." Benaiah reported to the king, "This is how Joab answered me." Then the king commanded Benaiah, "Do as he says. Strike him down and burn him, bury him and clear me and my whole family of the guilty innocent blood that Joab shed. Then the Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without my father David knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword, both of them Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army, were better men and more upright than he. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever, but on David and his descendants, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever. So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried in his home out in the country. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army, and in Joab's position replaced with Zadok the priest. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." Shimei answered the king, "What you say is good. Your servant will do as my lord the king has said." And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, the king of Gath, And Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." At this he saddled his donkey and went to Achish and Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you? On the day you leave to go anywhere else, you can be sure you will die. At that time you said to me, 'What you say is good. I will obey.' When did you not keep? Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you?" The king also said to Shimei, "You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne remains secure before the Lord forever." Then the king gave the order, Benai son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. The kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. 1 Kings chapter 3. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking in accordance with the instructions given him by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon and offered sacrifices for that which was most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father." David, "But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people, and you have chosen a great people, too numerous to count our number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this, so God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for a long life or wealth or for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem before the ark of the Lord's covenant and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a great feast. Now, 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, "Pardon me, my lord." The woman said, "I live in the same house and had a baby while she was there with me. The third day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the two of us. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. She got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side. While I, your servant, was asleep, she put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast. The next morning, I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it was not my son I had born." The other woman said, "No, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours." But the first one said, "No, the dead one is yours, the living one is mine." And so they argued before the king. Then the king said, "This one says, 'My son is alive, and your son is dead.' Well, that one says, 'No, your son is dead, and mine is alive.'" Therefore the king said, "Bring me a sword." So they brought the sword for the king. He then gave an order, "Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of love for her son and said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in two." Then the king gave his ruling, "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. 1 Kings chapter 4. So King Solomon ruled over all Israel, and these were his chief officials: Azra, son of Zadok the priest; Eliphro and Adashah, the sons of Shisha, secretaries; Jehoshaphat, son of Ahulad, recorder; Benai, son of Jehoiada, commander-in-chief; Zadok of Abiathar, priest; Azra, sons of Nathan, in charge of district governors; Zava, son of Nathan, in charge of district governors; Zava, son of Nathan, a priest and advisor to the king; Avishar, palace administrator; Adoram, son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. Solomon had 12 district governors over all Israel who had supplied provisions for the king and the royal household. Each one had to provide supplies for 1 month in the year. These are their names: Ben-Hur in the country of Ephraim, Ben-Decker in Maacah, Salmon, Ben-Shemath and Alan in Bethanan, Ben-Hesed in Arbus, Succoth and all the land of Hepher were his. Ben-Abinadab in Naphathor, he was married to Taphath, daughter of Solomon. Bana, son of Ahilud in Tanakh and Maglah, and all of Bethshan. Next was Zarathan below Jezreel, and Bethshan, Abel, and Manasseh across Joker, and Ben Gabir and Ramoth Gilead, the settlements of Jair, son of Manasseh. Gilead were as well as region of Agam and Bashan, with 60 large walled cities with bronze gate bars. Abinadab, son of Ido and Mahinam, Amos and Naphtali, he married Basemath, daughter of Solomon; Bana, son of Hushai and Asher, and Jehoshaphat, son of Hori and Eskar; Shimei, son of Eli and Benjamin; Geber, son of Uri in Gilead, the country of Sihon, king of the Ammonites, and the country of Og, the king of Bashan. He was the only governor to in Gilead, Amorites, and country. He was the only governor over the district. The people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore, and they ate, they drank, and were happy. And Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines, and as far as the border of Egypt. These countries brought tribute, were Solomon's subjects all his life. Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of the finest flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, 20 of pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl, for he ruled over all the kingdoms west of the Euphrates River, from Tipsha to Gaza, and had peace on all sides. During Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, lived in safety, everyone under their own vine and their own fig tree. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for chariot horses and 12,000 horses. The district governors, each in the month, supplied provisions for King Solomon, and all this came to the king's table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. They also brought to the proper place their quotas of barley and straw for chariot horses and other horses. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding, and a measureless in the sand and the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people in the east, and greater than the wisdom of Egypt. He was even wiser than anyone else, including Ethan the Ezrahite, wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame spread throughout the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs and songs, numbered 1,005. He spoke about plant life, from the cedar and Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the walls. He also spoke about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. From all the nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard his wisdom. First Kings chapter 5. When Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon had been anointed king to succeed his father, David. He sent envoys to Solomon because he had always been on friendly terms with David. Solomon sent back this message to Hiram. You know that because of the wars waged against my father David from all sides, he could not build a temple for the name of the Lord his God until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. Now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster. I intend, therefore, to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David when he said, Your son, whom I put on the throne in your place, will build the temple for my name. So give orders that cedars of Lebanon be cut for me. My men will work with yours, and I will pay for your men whatever wages you set. You know that we have no one so skilled in felling timbers as the Sidonians. When Hiram heard Solomon's message, she was greatly pleased and said, Praise be to the Lord today, for he has given David a wise son to rule over this great nation. So Hiram sent word to Solomon, I have received the message you sent me and will do all you want, providing the cedar and juniper logs. My men will haul them down from Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea, and I will float them as rafts by sea to the place you specify. There I will separate them, and you can take them away. And you are to grant my wish by providing food for my royal household. In this way, Hiram kept Solomon supplied with all the cedar and juniper logs he wanted, and Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, in addition to 20,000 baths of pressed olive oil. Solomon continued to do this for him year after year. The Lord gave Solomon wisdom, just as he had promised them. There were peaceful relations between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, and so they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Abner was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workers. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of high-grade stone to provide a foundation of dressed stone for the temple. The craftsmen of Solomon, Hiram, and the workers of Byblos and cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. Well, this has been day 16 of our 60-day reading through the Word of God. Stay tuned tomorrow for day 17. Thank you.